The day Karen showed up at my door, I laughed bitterly, the kind of laugh that burns your throat. 20 years of her venom. And now she thought a sob story could erase it all? I was 9 when I first realized my mother wasn't like the ones on TV. Other kids had moms who baked cookies and kissed scraped knees. I had Karen who'd scream until the walls shook, her words slicing deeper than any knife. "You're nothing," she'd hiss, her breath sour with cheap wine. Eyes wild with something I couldn't name then but now know as rage. I'd hide in my closet, clutching a stuffed bear missing one eye, whispering to myself that I wasn't worthless, that I wasn't a mistake. But kids believe what they're told, and Karen's voice was louder than mine. Growing up in that house was like walking through a minefield. Karen was unpredictably a storm that could brew in seconds. One moment she'd be humming some old tune, stirring spaghetti sauce. The next she'd fling the pot across the kitchen because I'd spilled juice on the counter. "Look at this mess," she'd yell, her face red, veins bulging. "You can't do anything right." I'd clean it up, hands shaking while she loomed over me, listing every way I'd failed her since the day I was born. By 12 I stopped crying. Tears only made her angrier. School was my escape, the one place Karen's shadow couldn't reach. I threw myself into books, into math, into anything that made me feel like I existed beyond her insults. My teachers noticed. Mrs. Carter, my 7th grade English teacher, slipped me novels under the desk saying, "These will take you places, Sarah." I devoured them, dreaming of a life where I wasn't afraid to breathe. But even that wasn't safe. Karen found my copy of Jane Eyre once and tore it to shreds, screaming that I was too big for my britches, for reading fancy books. I taped the pages back together in secret, reading by flashlight under my blanket. By 16, I was counting the days until I could leave. Karen's abuse wasn't just words anymore. She'd grab my arm hard enough to bruise, shove me against walls when I talked back. Once, when I got an A on a science project, she laughed a cold, hollow sound and said, "You think you're smart. You're still nothing." That night I made a plan. I'd get out. I proved her wrong. I worked odd jobs, saved every penny, and applied for scholarships behind her back. When I got a full ride to a state university, I didn't tell her until the day I left. "You'll fail," she spat as I packed my bag. "You'll come crawling back." I didn't look at her as I walked out the door. College was my rebirth. Away from Karen I could breathe. I studied psychology, wanting to understand why she was the way she was, why I carried her voice in my head. I excelled, graduated with honors, and landed a job as a counselor for at-risk youth. Every day I helped kids like me, kids who'd been told they were nothing, and I saw them light up when someone believed in them. I built a life, a good one. Friends who became family. A cozy apartment filled with books, a career that mattered. I was thriving just like I'd promised myself. But Karen never left my mind completely. Her voice lingered, a ghost that whispered in my weakest moments. I'd wake up from nightmares where she was screaming, her face inches from mine. Therapy helped, but scars don't vanish, they just fade. I thought I'd left her behind for good until that knock on my door last month. I opened it, and there she was, older, friendlier, but unmistakably Karen. Her hair was gray now, her face lined with years of hard living. She clutched a crumpled envelope, her hands trembling. "Sarah," she said, her voice soft, almost broken. "I need to talk to you." I wanted to slam the door, to tell her to go to hell. But something in her eyes, desperation, maybe regret, made me pause. I let her in, my heart pounding. She sat on my couch, looking out of place among my books and plants. "I'm sick," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Cancer. I don't have long." My stomach twisted, but I stayed silent. She went on, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I know I was a terrible mother. I know I hurt you. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I want to make it right." Make it right? The words felt like a slap. I stood up, pacing, my hands clenched. "You think you can just show up after 20 years and say sorry?" I asked, my voice shaking. "You made my life hell, Karen. You told me I was nothing over and over until I believed it. Do you know what that does to a kid? She flinched, but I wasn't done. The anger I'd buried for years came rushing out, raw and unstoppable. I used to pray you'd love me just once. I used to think it was my fault that I wasn't good enough. But it was you. You were the one who failed. Karen sobbed, her head in her hands. I was broken, she said. My life was a mess, your father leaving, the drinking, the pain. I took it out on you. I know it was wrong. I wanted to scream that her excuses didn't matter, that they didn't erase the bruises or the nights I cried myself to sleep. But I also really saw her for the first time. Not the monster of my childhood, but a woman who'd let her own demons destroy the one person she should have protected. I didn't feel pity, not exactly, but I felt something heavier, grief maybe, for the mother I never had. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said finally, my voice steady now. I've built a life without you. I'm not that scared little girl anymore. She looked up, her eyes pleading. Please, Sarah. I don't want to die alone. That was the moment it hit me, the weight of her words, the finality of it. She wasn't just asking for forgiveness. She was asking for absolution, for a clean slate I wasn't sure I could give. I thought of all the kids I'd counseled, how I told them healing wasn't about forgetting but about choosing what to carry. Could I carry this? Could I let her back in even a little without losing myself? I told her to leave, that I needed time. She nodded, tears still falling, and handed me the envelope. Read this when you're ready, she said, then shuffled out the door. I stood there holding the letter, my heart a battlefield of anger and something softer, something I wasn't ready to name. That night I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table, the envelope unopened in front of me. Part of me wanted to burn it, to let her words die with her. But another part, the part that had taped together Jane Eyre, the part that had survived, knew I'd read it eventually. Not for her but for me. Because I wasn't nothing. I never was. The envelope sat on my kitchen table for 3 days, its edges curling in the humid air of my apartment. I'd walk past it, pretending it wasn't there. But it was like a heartbeat, steady and insistent, pulling me back. On the third night I couldn't ignore it anymore. I poured a glass of wine, sat down, and tore it open, my hands shaking not from fear but from the weight of what I might find. Inside was a single sheet of paper, Karen's handwriting shaky but deliberate. Sarah, it began, I know you owe me nothing. I'm writing this because I need you to know the truth, not to excuse what I did, but so you can understand. My eyes burned as I read, not ready to feel anything but anger. She wrote about her own childhood, her father's fists, her mother's silence, a house where love was a stranger. She wrote about my father, how he left her when I was 2, how she drowned her pain in bottles and bitterness. I saw you so bright and full of promise and I hated you for it, she admitted. You were everything I couldn't be. I put the letter down, my chest tight. It wasn't an apology, not really, just a confession, raw and unpolished. I wanted to hate her more, to use her words as fuel for my rage. But instead, I felt a crack in the wall I'd built around my heart. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a flicker of understanding. Karen wasn't a monster by design. She was a product of her own brokenness. But did that change anything? Did it make the years of her cruelty hurt less? The next day I called my best friend Mia, who'd been my rock through college and beyond. Over coffee, I told her everything: Karen's visit, the letter, the way my emotions were a tangled mess. Mia listened, her dark eyes steady, then said, You don't owe her anything, Sarah. But you owe yourself peace. Whatever you decide, make sure it's for you, not her. Her words stuck with me, a reminder that I had the power now, not Karen. I spent weeks wrestling with what to do. Part of me wanted to ignore her, to let her fade into the past where she belonged. But another part, the part that counseled kids through their own pain, knew that closure wasn't about erasing the hurt, but facing it. I wasn't ready to see her again, not yet, so I wrote her a letter of my own. I poured everything into it. The fear, the anger, the nights I'd spent hating myself because of her words. I told her about the woman I'd become. Not to boast, but to show her she hadn't broken me. I don't know if I can forgive you, I wrote. But I'm trying to let go for my sake. I hope you find peace, but I can't be the one to give it to you. I mailed the letter to the address she'd scrawled on the envelope, feeling lighter but not free. The act of writing it was like loosening a knot I'd carried for years. I didn't expect a response, and for a while I didn't get one. Life went on, work, friends, the small joys of a life I'd fought for. But Karen's shadow lingered, not as a threat now, but as a question. Could I let her go without losing the parts of me she'd shaped? 2 months later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was a nurse from a hospice center. Karen was fading fast, she said, and had asked for me. My first instinct was to say no, to protect the fragile peace I'd built. But something, curiosity, duty, maybe something softer, made me agree. I drove to the hospice the next day, my stomach in knots, unsure what I'd find. The room smelled of antiseptic and regret. Karen lay in a narrow bed, her body frail, her skin pale as paper. She looked nothing like the woman who'd towered over my childhood. Her eyes fluttered open when I walked in, and for a moment they lit up. "Sarah," she whispered, her voice barely there. "You came." I sat beside her, keeping my distance. "I got your letter," I said, my tone even. "I read it." She nodded, tears pooling in her eyes. "I don't deserve this. You being here." "No," I said, not harshly but firmly. "You don't. But I'm here anyway." We sat in silence for a long time, the only sound the faint beep of a monitor. Finally she spoke, her words slow and labored. "I was wrong about you. You're strong. Stronger than I ever was." I didn't know what to say. Her words didn't erase the past, but they were a balm. A small acknowledgement that I'd been right to believe in myself. I thought of the kids I worked with, how a single kind word could shift their world. Was this what I'd wanted all along? Not an apology, but proof that she saw me, really saw me, even if it was too late. "I'm not here to forgive you," I said finally. "I'm here because I needed to see you, to know you're not the monster I made you out to be. You're just human. Flawed and broken like all of us." She reached for my hand and I let her take it, her grip weak but warm. "Thank you," she whispered. I stayed for an hour, not saying much, just sitting with her. When I left, I didn't feel healed, but I felt lighter, like I'd set down a burden I'd carried too long. Karen died 3 days later. The nurse called to tell me, and I cried, not for her, but for the little girl I'd been, the one who deserved better. In the weeks that followed, I thought a lot about justice, about what it means to hold someone accountable while still finding room for grace. Karen's abuse had shaped me, but so had my choice to rise above it. I'd built a life not because of her but despite her, and that was my victory. Her begging, her tears, her confession, they weren't the justice I'd imagined as a kid, but they were something. Maybe justice isn't always punishment. Maybe it's the truth laid bare, the chance to say, "I survived and I'm enough." I kept her letter, tucked away in a drawer with my old copy of Jane Eyre. Not as a keepsake, but as a reminder of where I'd come from and how far I'd gone. I didn't forgive her, not fully, but I let go of the hate. It was the only way to keep moving forward. Now, as I sit in my office watching a teenage girl across from me talk about her own struggles, I see echoes of myself in her eyes. I tell her what I wish someone had told me. "You are not what happened to you. You are what you choose to become." She nods, and I know she's listening, just like I did when Mrs. Carter handed me those books. Healing isn't a destination. It's a journey, one I'm still on. Karen's story ended, but mine didn't. I'm thriving not to prove her wrong, but to prove myself right. And that, I think, is the real justice. What do you think? Was Sarah right to confront Karen, to give her that final moment, or should she have walked away for good? Is forgiveness a gift we give others, or is it something we do for ourselves? Share your thought. Show, do we balance justice and compassion in the face of deep hurt?